Hello, everyone, and welcome to EduMatch Tweet and Talk number 25. So follow along with here on Google Plus at bit.ly/5, as well as on Twitter with the hashtag EduMatch. Speaking of EduMatch, check us out, edumatch.education. You can sign up there to be the featured person of the day, and we'll get you connected with people all around the world, all around the clock on Twitter. So definitely do that. So tonight, we are going to be talking about etiquette in social media. So I'm going to introduce our wonderful moderator, Dr. Dorian Roberts. Welcome, and welcome to the panel as well.
Hey everybody, good evening. How are you? We welcome you to EduMatch Tweet and Talk, where tonight we are going to have some discussion about etiquette in social media. That would include Voxer, Twitter, Facebook, and everything else that you can imagine. So I would like to introduce my panel, or let them introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Shana.
Hey everybody, I'm Shana White from Metro Atlanta, and I am a middle school technology coordinator.
I'm sorry. Okay. And how about you, Susie?
Hi, I'm Susie Highley. I am a media specialist at a middle school in Indianapolis, Indiana.
And Tammy?
Hi, I'm Tammy Neil. I teach computer science in rural North Florida and super excited to be here tonight.
Dr. Dorian, I think that you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Share with all of us. My first question is, I would like for everybody to share with all of us what your etiquette practices are on social media. And why don't we go ahead, Tammy, and start with you.
Well, my number one rule on social media is to act like I do in real life. I try to treat everybody with respect and honesty, and do unto others as the phrase would go. So that's my number one rule. Do unto others as I would like to have done unto me.
Okay, Susie, how about you?
Well, she took one of my rules, but I also like to give credit where credit is due. So, for example, if I'm including a post in Facebook or I'm tweeting something in Twitter, I like to go out and find the original person and give them credit, and simply not just retweet something without actually looking at the post myself.
Excellent point. Very excellent point. Shana?
The big ones for me are I act, like Tammy said, the same way face-to-face, so nothing changes when I'm online. And the other big thing is not tooting my own horn. A lot of people are very boisterous, and some ways are very arrogant and want to toot their own horn and show how great they are. And I'm a person who doesn't do that, and I like to kind of encourage and empower other people, so I like to toot other people's horn rather than my own. And give other people the spotlight. So those are my two big practices.
Okay, very good. Sounds great. Let me ask you guys this. What do you consider being impolite in social media? Feel free, anybody jump in. I'm looking for a free-for-all conversation.
I'll answer that. Sometimes we make assumptions about people's situations that might not be correct. So we might say, well, you need to try this, you need to do that, and their situation might be completely different from ours. In some cases, instead of making statements, we should ask questions.
Oh, Susie, I really, really like that. Anybody else?
I think Tammy's typing, so I'll chime in real quick while she's taking care of Twitter. I would say the big thing is, and I think it's just in general, I would say it's the same for email communication. Sometimes people's tone is misconstrued. And so the tone that you express yourself, make sure it's clear, but also make sure that it's not something that's going to be taken or conceived in the wrong light. A lot of times I've seen people get in Twitter, they're in a chat, and they're conversing back and forth, and one person is taking offense to and the other person is really not trying to be offensive, but just realize how what you're saying is going to be perceived. A lot of times people don't want to think about that. They just want to speak and speak and speak and speak. And kind of like what Susie said, instead of waiting to reply and listening to what the person is saying or really, really digesting what they're typing, we are ready to reply immediately. And I think tone issues come across quite often in Twitter chats, Facebook, whatever. And those tones a lot of times can be misconstrued, but sometimes they're usually right on. You can tell when somebody's heated in Twitter. You can tell when somebody doesn't agree. Because their tone comes across that way.
Now, that's a good topic that I want to go into a little bit more, is tone and intonation of what somebody is saying, whether it be a tweet, a chat, a status, and a Voxer. One of the things that I would like to explore with the panelists tonight is, how do you make sure your tone is coming across correctly? Me, myself, I tend to lean more towards the side of Susie, who believes in asking questions instead of assuming. Is there anybody else that would like to give their input on that question?
Well, I think that number one, make sure you're not tweeting in all caps, because that comes off as shouting. So don't tweet in all caps, guys. But at the same time, sometimes you got to step away from it and come back to the conversation. If you feel yourself getting heated, step away. Think about it. It's just like impulse shopping. Don't impulse tweet. Sometimes that gets us in more hot water than anything else.
Exactly. Anyone else?
We also have to remember who our followers are, and sometimes we might tweet something that might apply to some of our followers, but not others. And I've found myself perhaps regretting something I've tweeted before when I remember who all might read it.
Okay, my next question, thank you for that, and I think all of you guys' views are very insightful. How do you, when we're talking about retweeting, we're talking about tone, how do we, as people, as a part of social media and using it very heavily, sometimes even with our students, how do we address opposing views that may be different than yours on social media? What's the etiquette? What etiquette do you suggest for that?
I think that there's a fine balance between being firm with whatever you stand for and showing your passion, but at the same time being respectful and respecting the other person's opinion. Nobody is going to agree. That's why the world is the way it is. And so you have to understand that no matter what, somebody's going to disagree with whatever your vantage point or your view is. But I think the clear thing, and I think Susie mentioned it before, is to listen and to ask questions. A lot of times I ask questions because I want people to defend their side. And I don't want to say that that's a negative thing, but I want you to tell me why you believe what you believe. And so when I ask questions, the intent of my question asking is not to be condescending, but to ask you to defend what you're trying to explain to me that you so passionately believe. And so I think when you come at that angle where you're basically trying to hear the person and listen intently and understand where they're coming from, you're going to be more apt to at least respect their vantage point. You might not agree with it, but you can still respect it, especially if they're a person that is able to defend what they're so passionate about.
Very good point.
That's when I go to blogging, to be honest with you. When I start to see that 140 characters isn't going to be enough to get my point out, that's when I know I've got a blog post to write. It gives me time to really dig in and defend, like Shana's saying, defend and produce the documentation and all the supports that go with why I may have a particular point of view. it's a lot easier to come back and say, okay, here is a page and a half on why I feel this way, and than it is to do that in 140 characters.
I would agree. It's especially hard on Twitter to create a evidence and a rebuttal. To me, it's just as hard. How about you, Susie?
I think sometimes we need to say something like, well, thank you for your input, or at least acknowledge them, that they might not agree with us. And sometimes I've seen people include something in a tweet that says, you know, I'd like to give you a little pushback, or what about, instead of just giving absolutes and saying, no, you know, this is always wrong, or this is always right. Leaving yourself open to see other views when you're tweeting it. The idea absolutes, I think, is what bothers me the most.
And you know what, Susie, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I too agree with that. I think that even when I argue, or someone is argue or philosophically debating with me via Twitter, number one, as Tammy has stated, you know, 140 characters is almost never enough, so maybe you might want to go to blogging as an option. And like you saying, it's very important to hear that person's point of view, because as we said, one size does not fit all. So a particular person could have a view based on the environment that they're in, or in our case, the audience that they have. It may work for them, where it may not necessarily work for somebody who is in a different district, different state, working with different guidelines. So I do appreciate everyone's view on that, and just respecting the differences. If you could give three top tips, shall we say, for etiquette and social media, what would they be? Shana, let's start with you.
My first one would be perception is reality. So understand what people are perceiving as their reality of the situation. The other one would be, at all times, it's great to have passion, but be respectful with your passion. And the last one is to be educated. Don't jump into situations that you don't know anything about just to antagonize, or you maybe see your friends. So you're like, oh, my PLN is up in here, I'm going to jump up in here, and you have no idea what they're talking about. You're not educated on the topic. So the education piece is huge. We don't know everything. Everybody wants to believe they do, and I think especially in educational technology, a lot of us believe we know a lot, and we are. I think we're a smart bunch, but we don't know everything. And so sometimes you have to take a step back and go learn and find out, or like Tammy said, reflect and blog on what you think about, because you might have a completely different opinion about a certain situation once you take that step back and reflect. So the big thing, I think, is the education piece. A lot of times people want to jump in, maybe talk about something that's a hot topic. Oh, let's talk about this, innovation, diversity, whatever, and they're not educated about those pieces. So the big thing is to make sure you know when you're jumping into these conversations via social media is that you're educated on the topics, because a lot of times you're going to jump in and it's not going to be a good time. Not be a good time for you, and you're not going to make it a good time for other people because you don't have that education piece or that reflective piece bringing that to the table.
Very good. How about you, Tammy?
Well, I don't know that I have so much 3 points as it is. I think this is a good place to say that when you're in the middle of a conversation and somebody does jump in with a difference of opinion, don't just jump at them. You know, they may not have all the facts and figures, but for a lot of people, jumping into a conversation, it might be their first ever Twitter conversation to jump into. It might, we don't know where everybody's coming from. So be aware that you may be talking to a newbie, you may be talking to a troll, you may be talking to a bot. Do a little bit, we can all hit the profile on Twitter and see if, before we reply and see what we think about that person. So, I just encourage you to do that especially when it's one of those hot topics in which, it seems like everybody's on one side and you might be on the other. Look and see look and see what's going on before you jump in.
Very good. Thank you for sharing, Tammy. And how about you, Susie?
Well, something that's mentioned in many different cases is assume good intentions instead of just jumping to the thinking that you're being attacked or your position is being attacked. Try and look at it from the other person's point of view, and maybe they really do feel like that what they're doing might be best for students, for example. And another one is think before you tweet. How many of us have deleted tweets later, but where you, especially if you're in one of those Twitter chats that I like to talk about, the tweets go by like a slot machine, it's just bing, 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 and you want to jump in there, and you just, you want to get your tweet in there, and you may have missed the forest for the trees. So sometimes you just need to sit back and think before you compose that tweet, for example. And my third one is, just take the time to lurk and get a feel for a conversation sometimes before you jump in, and don't feel like you have to continually tweet to get something out of it. If it's something that you can go back and look at the archive later, you can always follow up with the person later, so don't feel like it just always has to be immediate.
Oh, I like that. Thoughtfulness, consideration, being aware of people's background and circumstances and platforms, I think are all great tips we can take away from the conversation tonight. Ladies, I enjoyed speaking with you. I think you brought a lot to the table of social etiquette or etiquette in social media, and I'm going to end everything and wrap it up with our Sarah Thomas.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Dorian. Thank you so much to everyone on the panel, Shana, Susie, Tammy. Appreciated your insights. Thank you to everyone participating on Twitter. And as you can hear from my phone, the conversation is still going on. It's blowing up. So great job, great insights. So thank you to everyone. This podcast will be available as an iTunes podcast in the coming weeks. The Twitter chat will be storified. So come back next week. We're going to be talking about grading policies, so it's going to be great. We're going to have Tammy as well as Stephen moderated, so check that out, bit.ly/tweettalk26. tweettalk26. Anyone can be a panelist. If you're interested and you're an educator, then leave a comment on bit.ly/tweettalk26 saying panelist. Also, great news, we have a Blavathon coming up on December 30th, and it's starting at noon, and it's going until whenever. So we are looking for people to join in. We're looking for panelists. We are also looking for sponsors. So if you have an educational product and you'd like to send us some free promo codes that we can give away, then we would love to have those. Also, if you're an educator and you want to join us on panel and talk about all the great things that you're doing in your classroom, then you can sign up at bit.ly/Blavathon sign up. All right, so check that out. You can also subscribe to the EduMatch podcast at bit.ly/EduMatch podcast. So that's all we have for you this week. Have a great week, everyone. Enjoy, and see you next week. So take care and have a great one.